I used to measure my worth in slide decks and deadlines. The nights I stayed late at the office weren't sacrifices back then. They were proof that I mattered. The glow of my monitor at 10:47 p.m., the echo of my heels in an empty hallway, the cleaning crew nodding at me like I was one of them, someone who belonged in the building after hours. That was my world. My name on client emails, my ideas in the pitch. My boss leaning over my shoulder saying, "You know, if this lands, it puts you on a very short list for VP next year." I can still see that room if I close my eyes. The conference table scarred from years of coffee cups, the giant TV on the wall looping our deck, the view of the city dripping light like melted gold. My blazer was draped over the back of a chair. My ponytail was half falling apart, and my laptop was a mess of color-coded tabs. I wasn't just helping. I was leading. People waited to see what I thought. They paused when I cleared my throat. That little silence right before I spoke, that was my favorite sound in the world. Now my favorite sound is the dishwasher beeping that it's done. Mostly because it means I can finally sit down. As I'm talking to you, I'm not in that conference room. I'm standing barefoot in a kitchen with crumbs under my toes, leaning against a fridge that hums louder than the old office AC ever did. There's a schedule taped to the door. 2, actually. One for our son's soccer practices, one for our daughter's ballet and speech therapy appointments. Between them, half covered by a magnet shaped like a smiling avocado, is a printout of an email. The paper is curled at the edges now. The ink has started to fade. It's the promotion email. The one that began, "We're thrilled to formally offer you the Director of Brand Strategy role." At the time, I printed it because I wanted to frame it. I never got around to buying the frame. Somewhere along the way, the paper just turned into background noise, a scrap of my old life that survived the move and got demoted to fridge wallpaper. Back in those office days, I spoke fluent 5-year plan. Ask me where I saw myself, and I had a slide deck in my mind. Build out the team, develop 2 more flagship campaigns, transition to VP in 3 years, maybe CMO by 40. I didn't say that out loud. Women are supposed to be humble, but I thought it. I carried that secret ambition like jewelry under a sweater. You couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. I remember the last big pitch night so clearly it feels like it's still happening in some parallel universe where I didn't blink first. My boss, Mark, tapped the table with his pen and grinned at me. "You know this is yours, right?" he said. "I'm just here so legal doesn't panic." The client laughed, I laughed, but my hands shook a little as I scrolled through the slides. Because I believed him. When he said VP track, it didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like a promise. It's funny, the things you remember. I don't remember what I had for lunch that day, but I remember the exact shade of red of the Approve Budget button. I remember the client's perfume, something expensive and sharp. I remember thinking, this is what momentum feels like. The sense that the ground under your feet is a moving walkway, carrying you forward whether you can see the end or not. My kitchen floor feels very still. From where I'm standing now, I can see 3 school permission slips, a recipe for chicken casserole with someone else's handwriting on it, my mother-in-law's, and a faded drawing of our family that my daughter brought home. In that picture, I don't have a laptop. I'm holding a spatula. Everyone is smiling. There's no version of me on this fridge who just wrapped a multi-million-dollar campaign. Sometimes, after the kids are finally in bed and the house is quiet enough that I can hear the ice maker clunk inside the freezer. I open my phone and type in the URL of my old company's website. My fingers still know it by heart. The landing page has changed 3 times since I left, but the Leadership tab is always in the same place, waiting at the top like a dare. I click it and scroll, pretending I'm just curious. I look at the faces lined up in neat rows: the CEO, the CFO, the VP of sales. And then the role that used to be half whispered about in hallways when I walked by: VP of Brand and Strategy. Sometimes it's occupied by a woman with a perfect LinkedIn headshot, sharp jawline, tasteful blazer, a smile that says I wake up at 5 a.m. willingly. Sometimes it's a man who used to sit 3 seats away from me and ask me to pretty up his decks. Either way, it's not me. The bio talks about a decade of experience, driving growth, award-winning campaigns. Words they used to use when they talked about my work. Words I now hear in my head when I'm scraping dried oatmeal off a bowl. I tell myself it doesn't matter, that I chose this, that I'm lucky to be able to pack lunches and drive carpool and be the mom who shows up to daytime school events without begging a manager for time off, that I traded in meetings for memories, that a lot of women would kill for this. Some nights, I almost believe it. I rehearse the script everyone seems to want me to say. I just realized my priorities changed. Family comes first. That job was stressful anyway. I've said those lines at playgrounds to other moms, at Thanksgiving to my in-laws, even to my own parents over FaceTime. I say them so often they sound like they belong to me. But then I catch my reflection in the oven door after I close it. Hair thrown into a messy bun, wearing a t-shirt with a stain I can't name. And I see a woman who looks like she's living someone else's life. I used to walk into a conference room and feel taller. Now I walk into PTA meetings and feel like I'm wearing someone else's name tag. If you'd met me 5 years ago, blazer, badge, laptop bag digging into my shoulder, you wouldn't have recognized this version of me. I didn't at first. The transition wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was a series of small, reasonable choices that added up. A postponed start date, a temporary move, a just for a few years compromise that wrapped itself around my career like ivy, slow and gentle, until the bricks disappeared. From the outside, my life probably looks fine. 2 healthy kids, a husband with a good job, a house in a safe neighborhood, a full fridge. On Instagram, it looks more than fine. But if you peel back the filters and the gratitude posts, there's a question that hums under everything I do, as relentless as this fridge. When did I stop being the woman in that conference room and become just mom? The cruelest part is that there wasn't some clear villain in a cape who snatched my career away in one night. If there had been, maybe I would have fought harder. Instead, my future was negotiated in casual comments, in we decisions that didn't feel like choices, in family dinners where I laughed in the right places and didn't realize until later that something important had been traded on my behalf. Back then, if you'd told me my future would be decided at my in-laws' dining table, I would have laughed. The promotion email didn't live on my fridge at first. It arrived in my inbox at 9:12 a.m. on a Tuesday, flagged high importance, like it knew it was supposed to change my life. I was in the office, halfway through reheating a sad scrambled egg breakfast in the break room microwave, when my phone buzzed. The subject line was simple: Formal offer, Director of Brand Strategy. My heart did that weird double-step thing, like it tripped and then tried to play it off as dancing. I walked back to my desk with the plastic container in my hand, suddenly very aware of how cheap it looked. I set it down, clicked the email open, and there it was in black and white. Bigger title, higher salary, bonus structure, leadership responsibilities spelled out like bullet points in a fantasy. The kind of email people screenshot and send to friends with 10 exclamation marks. Mark, my boss, appeared at the edge of my monitor before I could even finish reading. "Well," he said, eyebrows raised, "you going to pretend you didn't see it, or?" I laughed, a little dazed. "I'm still reading it." He leaned against my cubicle wall, arms folded, looking more proud than my own father had when I graduated. "Look, we've been angling for this for a while," he said. "This isn't charity. You earned it. You step into this role, and the VP conversation becomes real, not theoretical. You understand that, right?" I understood. I understood in the way your skin understands sunlight. I saw a future unfold in my mind. A team of my own. Strategy meetings where I wasn't just the one who stayed late to execute, but the one who made the call. A salary that could stand on its own next to anyone's. A feeling that my life was still moving forward, not just laterally. "I do," I said. "I really do." "Good," he replied, pushing off the wall. "Talk to Ethan. Sleep on it if you want. But don't overthink this. We're excited to have you step up." When he walked away, I stared at the numbers again. The raise meant we could crush the student loans faster, build savings, maybe finally stop counting every Amazon order in my head. It wasn't just ego. It was security. It was leverage. It was options. I texted Ethan a screenshot, adding, "We need to celebrate tonight. Big news." He replied with 3 fire emojis and, "Knew it. Proud of you. Let's talk later tonight. My mom wants us to come over for dinner Thursday, BTW." At the time, dinner Thursday sounded like a normal sentence. I didn't think of it as a pivot point, just another meal where his mom would send us home with leftovers and unsolicited advice. I didn't know they had rehearsed lines of their own. His parents' dining room had always felt slightly theatrical to me. The long table, the heavy chairs, the framed family photos watching from the walls. Ethan's Little League trophies, his sister's cheerleading pictures, the formal portrait where everyone wore matching blue. Even the chandelier seemed like it was waiting for cues. That Thursday, the table was set like it was a holiday. Cloth napkins, the good plates, a roast that must have taken hours. His mom hugged me longer than usual when we arrived, her perfume thick and floral. "Sit, sit," she said, guiding us to our seats. "You must be exhausted. Work is crazy, right? Ethan told us you're doing big things at the office." I shot Ethan a small smile across the table. "It's been busy," I said. "Actually, His dad cleared his throat and lifted his wine glass. "We're proud of both of you," he said, interrupting. "You kids work so hard. That's why this is not easy." The air shifted. Ethan's hand, resting on his knee under the table, tightened around mine. His mom glanced at his dad, then at Ethan. Her eyes were already shining. "We didn't want to worry you," she began. "But the business has been going through a rough patch. You know how the market is. Your father has been losing sleep." I listened as they laid it out, piece by piece. Declining sales, overhead, a key client that had pulled out, a competitor opening 2 blocks away. Words like bridge loan and cutbacks floated over the mashed potatoes. "It's nothing we can't handle," his dad said quickly, like he was trying to patch a leak mid-sentence. "But we could really use you back at the store, son. Just for a while. Get things back on track." Ethan shifted in his chair. "Dad, we've built a life here," he said. Your job is important, of course," his mom cut in. "But you're our only son. This business is your legacy. We always assumed you'd take it over. We just thought, maybe now is the time to start transitioning before things get worse." Transitioning. The word landed in my stomach like a stone. They looked at Ethan when they spoke about responsibility, legacy, the family name. They looked at me when they spoke about support, understanding, and compromise. His mom reached across the table and touched my hand. "We know you have your work, dear," she said. "But a career is flexible at your age, isn't it? Family is only one. The store is part of our history." My tongue went numb. I thought of the email in my inbox, the one with numbers and bullet points and "we're thrilled." I thought of my boss saying, "Don't overthink this," and his mother saying, "Just for a few years." "You wouldn't have to quit right away," his dad added quickly. "Maybe you could scale back, work remote. Young people do that now, right?" I almost laughed. Our company did not scale back. You either filled the role or someone else did. But the way they looked at us, at Ethan especially, made it feel like we were already failing them by not standing up and saying yes. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Can we talk about this?" he asked. "Just us?" His mom's eyes filled again. "Of course," she said. "We just wanted you to know we need you. We thought, if you two came back just for a few years, we could stabilize everything. Then you could decide what you want to do." She glanced at me. "You could even have more help with the kids. We'd be right there." More help with the kids. I was helping with the kids. I was the help with the kids. We drove home in a silence that felt like something alive was sitting in the back seat with us. Our apartment looked different that night. Same furniture, same sink full of dishes, same soft toy abandoned on the couch. But everything seemed thinner somehow. Like the walls were made of paper and someone had started writing on the other side. Ethan loosened his tie and tossed his keys in the bowl by the door, then just stood there. "So," he said. "So," I echoed. He turned toward me, hands on his hips in that way he did when he was trying to be calm. "They're scared," he said. "I've never seen my dad like that." "I know," I said. And I did. I knew what fear looked like. I'd seen it in clients' eyes when campaigns tanked, in co-workers' faces during layoffs. I recognized it in his parents' voices when they said, "rough patch," and meant, "we're sinking." "I can't just watch them lose everything," he continued. "That's the store, the house, their retirement. It's not just a job, it's family," I finished for him. "I get it." He nodded, relieved. Exactly. Just for a few years. We move back, I step in, we stabilize things, they can breathe. Then we revisit. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, staring at the faucet. Okay, I said slowly. So where in that plan does my promotion fit? He closed his eyes for a second. I knew you were going to say that. Of course I'm going to say that, I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. I spent years trying to get to this point, Ethan. This isn't some random title. It's the path to VP. It's everything I've been working for. He came to stand opposite me. I know, he said, softer. And I'm proud of you. You know that, right? Pride doesn't pay for daycare, I said. That promotion would. He rubbed his forehead. Look, your job is more flexible. Brand strategy is needed everywhere. You could pick it back up later. My parents' store is one specific thing. If it goes under, that's it. There's no later. There it was. The invisible scale. On one side, my career, abstract and flexible. On the other, his parents' tangible crisis with faces and names and a dining room and a mortgage attached. What about childcare? I asked. If we move back, I'm the one who's going to be home with the kids even more. I can't do 60-hour weeks in a new director role and be the default parent in a new town with no friends. That's not realistic. They said they'd help, he countered. My mom would be around. We'd have family nearby. Isn't that what you always say you miss? Support? I stared at him. Ethan, your mother helped tonight by suggesting my career is flexible. He flinched. That's not what she meant. That's exactly what she meant. The argument didn't explode the way some couple stories do. It didn't involve shouting or broken dishes. It was more like a tide creeping in, each little wave eating another inch of sand. We listed expenses. We listed responsibilities. We said words like mortgage, preschool, commute. He said his job was tied to his name, his family, his hometown. He said mine was tied to a resume that would still be there in a few years. I said resumes age, skills rust. Industries move on without you. We circled the same points until we were both too tired to pretend this was purely logical. Just for a few years, he said again, voice soft. We move, they stabilize, you take a breath, we reset. You've been burnt out anyway. Maybe this is a sign. Burnt out. I thought about the way my heart had leapt at that email. Burnt out people don't light up like that. I looked at him, at the boy I'd once cheered for in cheap bleachers, at the man who had held my hand through 2 labors, at the son whose parents had just reminded him he wasn't just himself. He was theirs. I felt something in me tug toward him, and something else tug away. I don't want to resent you, I said quietly. Then don't, he replied, almost pleading. We're on the same team. The thing about being on the same team is that someone still plays defense while someone else goes for the shot. Not everyone gets to move forward at the same time. The sentence slipped out of my mouth before I could stop it. Maybe my promotion can wait. Your parents need you now. The relief on his face was immediate and almost painful to look at. He stepped forward, wrapped his arms around me, kissed the top of my head. "Thank you," he whispered. "You won't regret this, I promise. It's just a season." I nodded against his chest, but behind his shoulder, my eyes landed on my phone on the counter. The promotion email still glowed on the screen, waiting for a reply. The funny thing is, nobody wrote a formal offer letter for the job I was about to take instead. The thing about big life changes is that they don't feel big at first. They start as calendar events. A date you circle, a lease end, a moving truck booked for the 15th. You walk around saying sentences like, "Yeah, we're relocating next month," the same way you'd say, "Yeah, we're repainting the bathroom." My last month in the city office felt like a weird farewell tour. I still went to meetings, still answered emails, still fixed last-minute mistakes in decks I technically wouldn't own anymore. The promotion offer was still sitting in my inbox, politely ignored, like an invitation I'd decided not to RSVP to. HR assumed it was a timing thing. My boss assumed I was negotiating. Only Ethan and I knew I was quietly stepping off the track altogether. I packed my office into 3 cardboard boxes. That was all it took to erase 10 years. 3 boxes. One for books and framed certificates, one for knickknacks and the single plant that had somehow survived my neglect, and one for notebooks and flash drives and a coffee mug with a chipped handle. My nameplate went in last. It felt heavier than it looked. On my last day, the team bought cupcakes and cheap champagne. Someone printed a banner that said, "We'll miss you," with a font that belonged on a toddler's birthday invite. Mark made a little speech about new seasons and family priorities and how lucky your kids are. Everyone clapped. I smiled and said all the right things. I did not say, "I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing." That didn't feel allowed. "Stay in touch," my coworkers said as they hugged me. "We'll see you back here when the kids are older," one woman joked. "Once the family stuff settles down, you'll be back in the game," another said. I nodded like that was the plan, like there was a game waiting with my name taped to a seat. The city shrank in the rearview mirror as we drove toward our fresh start. The kids slept. Ethan hummed along to the radio, and I watched the skyline get smaller until it was just a story I could point to and say, "I used to live there." Our new town smelled like cut grass and car exhaust from SUVs. The houses were close enough together that you could see your neighbors' TV channels through their windows if you tried, but far enough apart that you needed a car for everything. The kind of place where every house had a wreath on the door in whatever season it currently was. Ours arrived bare, waiting for us to decide who we were now. I threw myself into unpacking like it was a job. Boxes became tasks. Tasks became checklists. If I could just get through enough bullet points every day, maybe the ache in my chest would cash out as accomplishment instead of loss. Kitchen first, because apparently that's where a home lives. Plates on shelves, glasses in cabinets, spices lined up in a row like little soldiers. I kept telling myself, "I'm building something here. This is still work. This matters." I labeled drawers, I hung a calendar, I started a new fridge collection, school flyers, local pizza menus, the schedule for storytime at the library. The kids' rooms came next. Tiny beds against unfamiliar walls, their favorite stuffed animals propped up who knows where while I tried to remember which box held the nightlight that made monsters stay away. I arranged toys on shelves and stuck glow-in-the-dark stars on ceilings that did not feel like they belonged to us yet. The house slowly became less a stranger's house filled with our stuff, and more our house that still smelled faintly of someone else's paint choice. Every time I opened a closet or a drawer, I found another reminder that other lives had happened here. A forgotten crayon, a scuff mark, a nail left in a wall at a height that suggested a wedding photo once hung there. I told myself that meant good things could grow here too. Daytime became a series of small missions. Learn the school system, figure out bus routes, register for soccer, find the grocery store with the okay produce, and the coffee shop that wouldn't misspell my name too badly. I wore comfortable sneakers and carried a clipboard like I was on assignment. It helped. Neighbors appeared like NPCs in a video game, popping into view with casseroles and smiles and preloaded questions. "So, what brings you guys here? Are you excited to be closer to family? Where does your husband work?" They always asked about Ethan, what he did, where the store was, how long his parents had owned it. Some already knew. Small towns have that muscle, word of mouth. I learned more about his family business from strangers on the sidewalk than I had in years of holiday dinners. When they turned to me, the questions shifted. "And you? Are you home with the kids? Do you work too, or planning on picking up something local? The schools always need volunteers." I practiced different answers. "I used to work in marketing," I'd say. "Brand strategy." "Oh, wow, that sounds fancy," they'd respond, eyebrows up. "But it must be nice to slow down now, right?" I smiled. "Yeah, it's different, but good." I didn't mention the 3 boxes in the garage, stacked neatly against the wall, my nameplate sitting on top like a paperweight on a closed chapter. It didn't take long for Ethan's parents to fold me into their definition of help. It started small, the way these things always do. "We're just a bit short-staffed at the front," his mom said one afternoon. "Do you mind sitting at the desk for a couple hours? Answer the phones, take messages? You're so good with people." Then, "Our website looks a little dated. Could you take a quick look? Just while you're around, no pressure." Just while we're understaffed became just until we hire someone. Just until we hire someone became a floaty, indefinite for now. I found myself at the store in the mornings, kids dropped off at school, wearing a name tag that said the family's last name and answering phones with, "Thank you for calling, how can I help you?" I tweaked the website between calls, updated product photos, rewrote copy that sounded like it had been written in 1998 by someone who hated adjectives. "You're a lifesaver," his mom would say, squeezing my arm as she passed. "We couldn't afford to bring in an agency right now. This is such a blessing." Blessing. That was the word. My work in the city had been billable hours. Here it was a blessing. When Ethan came home late, smelling like dust and stress from the store, he'd kiss my forehead and ask, "How were the kids? Everything good?" I'd tell him about soccer sign-ups and homework battles and the latest drama in the PTA group chat. Sometimes I'd mention a small victory at the shop, how I fixed a listing that was costing them money, or streamlined the way orders came in. "That's amazing," he'd say. "Seriously, you're holding everything together." I'd soak in the compliment like a plant getting water in the wrong season. It kept me alive, but it didn't help me grow in the direction I'd planned. At night, when the kids were finally asleep and the house settled into that heavy quiet, my mind would drift back to my old life. I'd picture my former team in the conference room, new campaigns on the board, someone else's name on the email threads. I'd imagine the director of brand strategy, my almost title, sitting where I once sat, making decisions that would ripple across markets. Then I'd shut my laptop and research second-grade reading requirements or bake muffins for the fundraiser. I told myself this was temporary, a few years, a season, an investment in our future, in the kid's roots, in his parents' stability. I repeated those phrases like affirmations. You're being a good wife. You're being a good mom. You're doing the right thing. It felt noble to frame it that way, like I was some kind of behind-the-scenes hero, doing unglamorous work so everyone else could shine. There's a special kind of high that comes from self-erasure when people keep thanking you for it. The first time someone called me Ethan's wife like I didn't have a name, I laughed it off, and then I heard myself using it too. Must be nice not to have to work. If I had $1 for every time I heard that, I could have funded my own retirement plan and skipped this entire detour. The school pickup line is like a conveyor belt of minivans and unsolicited opinions. I stood on the sidewalk with the other moms, clutching a reusable coffee cup like a prop. The woman next to me, Ashley, I think, or maybe Amber, smiled at me over her sunglasses. "So, you're home full-time, right?" she asked. "Ethan's mom was saying you left your job in the city when you moved." I hesitated. "Yeah, I used to be in marketing, brand strategy. But with the move and the kids, it just made sense to take a break. I'm helping at the store a bit." Her smile widened. "Oh my God, that's the dream. Honestly, you're so lucky. I'd quit tomorrow if we could afford it. My job is such a nightmare." I nodded like she'd complimented my shoes. "Yeah, I'm lucky." Behind us, car doors slammed, and kids yelled each other's names. The line inched forward, teachers shepherding small humans out of the building like it was a controlled evacuation. I watched my son emerge, backpack hanging off one shoulder, eyes scanning for me. When he saw me, he waved so hard his arm looked like it might detach. In that moment, I did feel lucky. Then I thought about my old office, the one with my name on the door. No one there would have called me lucky to walk away. They would have called it a loss. At the school's fall barbecue, the lucky comments multiplied like fruit flies. We stood in someone's backyard, the smell of grilled hot dogs hanging in the air, kids running in circles with their faces painted like tigers and butterflies. Ethan was at the grill with a cluster of dads, talking about something involving numbers and shipments I half understood. I was at the folding table, refilling chips and stacking paper plates. "So what do you do?" a woman asked, introducing herself as Megan's mom. Behind her, a bounce house gasped and wheezed as kids hurled themselves around inside. "I used to work in marketing," I said. "Now I'm home with the kids, and I help at my in-laws' store." "Oh, that's so nice," she replied. "You're there for everything. I swear, I miss half my kids' stuff because I'm stuck at the office. You're really lucky." There it was again. Lucky like I'd won something, not given something up. Ethan's uncle clapped him on the back as they approached the food table. "Man, it's great you came back when you did," he said loudly. "Store really needed you, and you brought this one with you to keep you organized, huh?" He jerked his chin in my direction. "She helps you out a little, right?" "A little." "Yeah," Ethan said, smiling at me. "She keeps us from falling apart." His tone was kind. The words still landed wrong. Keeps us from falling apart. Us being his parents, the business, our kids, him. My role was a glue stick now, invisible once it dried. His aunt chimed in. "Oh, and she doesn't even have to worry about a job. Such a blessing. You get to focus on what really matters. I swallowed a mouthful of potato salad that suddenly felt like paste. Yeah, I said, it's a blessing. On the outside, I knew how this looked. One income, family nearby, flexible schedule. The American dream rebranded for Pinterest. On the inside, my LinkedIn notifications were starting to feel like ghost taps on my shoulder. At night, after homework and bath time, and one more story, and Mom, I need water, and Mom, my leg feels weird. The house finally went quiet. That's when my phone came out. I'd curl up on the couch or sit at the kitchen table and open LinkedIn like I was checking the weather in a city I no longer lived in. My feed was a highlight reel of my old life. There was Jamie, who used to ask me to proofread her emails, now announcing her promotion to senior brand manager. Thrilled to be leading such an amazing team. The comments were full of clapping emojis and well-deserved from names I recognized. There was a post from my old company's page celebrating a successful product launch. I knew that brand inside out. I could see the fingerprints of strategies I'd helped build a year before. Only now, the quote attached to the press release was from the new director of brand strategy, the role that might have been mine. Every so often, a recruiter message popped up. Hi, my name. Your profile is impressive. Are you open to new opportunities? I'd stare at the words, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I'd type some version of, Hi, thanks for reaching out. I've recently relocated and am focusing on family for now, but I'll keep this in mind. Send. Archive. Pretend it didn't sting. Meanwhile, my email inbox was full of PTA threads. Can someone bring cupcakes on Friday? Who can volunteer for the book fair? We still need one more parent for the field trip chaperone list. My to-do list looked like it had been written by two different people. Update web copy for seasonal sale. Reply to PTA about Spirit Week. Schedule pediatric dentist. Optimize Google listing for the store. Order printer ink. There was no line between home and work anymore. It was all just me. One night, after a particularly long scroll session, I looked up and realized I'd been using my promotion email as a coaster. I'd printed it months ago and brought it with us, folded into a file labeled Important Documents. Somewhere during the unpacking frenzy, it had escaped the folder and migrated to the fridge, magnetized and forgotten. Now it sat half-covered by a chore chart with stickers for brush teeth, make bed, be kind. A corner of the letter peeked out. We're thrilled to formally offer you. Offer who? The woman who existed in those offices? Or this version of me with applesauce on her sleeve? I stood up and walked to the fridge. The kitchen was dim except for the glow from the over-the-stove light, casting everything in a soft yellow that made the magnets look like they'd been there for years instead of months. The fridge door had become a kind of family billboard, spelling tests, a calendar with Ethan's shifts at the store, a flyer for a charity car wash, my daughter's uneven drawing of us, all holding hands, our bodies lopsided but smiling. And beneath it all, that letter. The text was fading where the magnet pressed hardest. The part with the salary had a smear across it, from some long-ago splash of something, probably juice. Or maybe it was me, brushing past too quickly, wiping it away without noticing. I pulled the chore chart up and read the first lines again. We're thrilled to formally offer you the Director of Brand Strategy role, effective. The date felt like it belonged to a different century. From the living room, I could hear the muffled sound of sports commentators, Ethan unwinding with a game, the constant commentary a backdrop to his own exhaustion. He'd spent the day putting out fires at the store. I'd spent it putting out smaller, quieter fires everywhere else. Neither of us had flames left for this conversation. My reflection in the stainless steel door looked warped. My face stretched slightly by the curve. For a second, I imagined opening the door and finding my old desk inside. Laptop, stack of reports, my favorite pen. A life preserved in cold storage, waiting for me to come back and claim it. Instead, there was milk and yogurt and leftover casserole. I could hear Ethan's mom in my head, telling someone at church, "Oh, she just helps Ethan out a little. She's so good with the computer stuff." Just helps a little. The way people just help with the bake sale, or just help set up chairs. No one mentioned that I used to own my own projects, that I used to sign off on budgets bigger than the store's entire monthly revenue, that people once introduced me as the strategist behind that campaign. Now I was Ethan's wife, who was so lucky not to have to work. At first, when people used that phrase, I'd laugh and correct them gently. "Oh, I did work," I'd say. "For years. I was a director in marketing." Sometimes they'd look impressed. More often, they'd tilt their head and say something like, "Wow, and you gave all that up for your family. That's amazing." They meant it as a compliment. It felt like an obituary. The worst part wasn't that other people couldn't see me. It was how quickly I started editing myself down to match. At playdates and barbecues, I heard myself say, "Oh, I just help Ethan at the store." As if my past 10 years were a line item too long to bother including. I pushed the chore chart back down over the letter until only the company logo showed. Then I pinned a school lunch menu over that. The fridge hummed, oblivious. It wasn't like anything dramatic happened in that moment. No sudden lightning bolt of clarity. Just a quiet, sharp awareness that something precious was being buried under permission slips and grocery lists, one magnet at a time. That was the first night I shut the fridge door a little harder than I meant to. Upscale restaurants all kind of smell the same to me, like butter, perfume, and a little bit of ego. The private room they booked for Ethan's dad's birthday was the nicest one in town. White tablecloths, dim lighting, a wall of wine bottles behind glass like an exhibit. The kind of place where the menus don't have prices next to everything, just a few numbers you're supposed to pretend not to notice. They'd pushed 2 long tables together, family on one side, important people on the other. Ethan's parents had invited a couple of longtime suppliers, their banker, and a local realtor who sent good referrals. I sat between Ethan and his sister, across from his parents. The kids were parked at the far end with chicken tenders and fries, a little island of ketchup and crayons in a sea of filet mignon. I'd worn my nicest dress. Not office nice. Those clothes were in a box somewhere under holiday decorations, but respectable wife at a fancy dinner nice. I'd even curled my hair. It felt like I was cosplaying a version of myself who was used to being in rooms like this for reasons other than being someone's +1. The first half of the evening was fine. Safe topics, the weather, the new coffee shop in town, the business, of course, updates on inventory, plans for a remodel, jokes about surviving another year. I chimed in where I could, mostly when the conversation touched something I'd secretly fixed or improved. "So we've been getting a surprising number of online inquiries lately," the banker said at one point. "Whatever you're doing with your website, keep it up." My ears perked. That was my lane. I glanced at Ethan, waiting for him to mention it. He didn't. "Yeah," Ethan's dad said, shrugging. Word of mouth, I guess. People just find us. I felt my cheeks warm. People find you because I rebuilt your SEO from the ground up and started running targeted posts. But sure, let's call it magic. I took a sip of my wine and let it slide. It wasn't the moment to make it about me. That's what I told myself anyway. Dessert plates were cleared, and someone brought out a cake with candles that spelled 60. We sang, took pictures, clapped when his dad made a little speech about family and gratitude and the good Lord's blessings. It was corny and sweet and, for a second, almost pure. Then the mood shifted. The banker raised his glass. To another 60, huh? He joked. And to Ethan, for stepping up when it counted. Not every son would come back home and work like that. There was a murmur of agreement around the table, a little chorus of hear, hear. Ethan looked embarrassed but pleased. He squeezed my knee under the table. I squeezed back. That part I agreed with. He had stepped up. He was working hard. His dad chuckled, shaking his head in mock exhaustion. Work like a dog is right, he said. He's at the store before I get there most mornings, and half the time he's still there when I leave. Saint Ethan, his sister said, smirking. Don't let it go to your head. Then his dad added, and all while his wife just plays on Pinterest all day. The table laughed. It was the kind of laugh that starts as polite and then snowballs, fueled by the relief of having something light to latch onto. Business contacts chuckled, relatives grinned. Even the waiter at the door smiled like he'd heard this one before. I felt my face freeze. I knew it was a joke. I knew he didn't mean it literally. That's what everyone would say if I called it out. But jokes land where they're aimed, not where they're thrown. And this one hit me square in the chest. I opened my mouth to say something, anything to deflect. But Ethan got there first. Hey now, he said, grinning, raising his glass. Give her some credit. She's got a PhD in target runs and a black belt in Pinterest boards. Laughter again, louder this time. The banker leaned back, amused. That's a full-time job from what my wife tells me, he said. Those aisles are dangerous. I smiled. That's what you do when people say things that make you want to dissolve. You show your teeth so they don't see the swallow. If you'd looked closely, you might have noticed my hand tightening around my napkin until my knuckles went white. But no one was looking closely. They were looking at Ethan, the hard-working son, and at his dad, the charming small business owner with the self-deprecating humor, and at me, the punchline. I mean, she helps out at the shop a little, his mom added, like a gentle amendment. And she's wonderful with the kids. We couldn't do it without her. To the glue, Ethan's uncle chimed in, raising his glass in my direction. Holding it all together. Everyone drank. I did too. The wine tasted suddenly sour. I could have let it slide. I almost did. But then the banker turned to me, eyebrow raised. So, is that true? He asked, joking but curious. You really spend all day on Pinterest? There was my opening. Small, but there. I set my glass down carefully. Not exactly, I said, keeping my tone light. I've actually been running a social media campaign for the shop. We updated the website and posting schedule, started pushing customer reviews. That's where a lot of those online inquiries are coming from. For a heartbeat, there was a polite, blank pause. Then Ethan's sister snorted. "Oh my God," she said, rolling her eyes. "Social media. That's not a real job. It's scrolling with extra steps." A few people chuckled. The realtor nodded like he'd heard something wise. "My niece does that," he added. "She's on her phone all day, says she's working. Kids these days." I felt the floor tilt a little. "Actually, it's more strategy than scrolling," I said, still trying, still reaching for some version of myself that owned a room. "We change the way the brand shows up online and—" Sure, Ethan's sister cut in, waving her fork. "But it's not like a real campaign like you used to do, right? It's just posts for the family shop. It's cute. Don't make it sound like Madison Avenue." Her tone was airy, dismissive, as if I'd claimed I'd been performing open-heart surgery in the back room between loading the dishwasher and carpool. Ethan laughed a little, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, whatever she's doing is working," he said, trying to soften it. "I don't pretend to understand algorithms. I just lift things." His mom patted my hand. "We're just grateful she has time to do it," she said. "Not everyone is lucky enough to stay home and help." Lucky. There it was again, like a bell ringing every time I tried to re-enter the world. I smiled on cue, tossed my hair, made some self-deprecating comment about my glamorous life as the queen of casserole recipes and Instagram captions. The table laughed, satisfied. Joke completed, tension diffused, no harm done. Except there was harm. It just didn't show up on anyone's face but mine, and I'd trained mine not to show much either. I glanced down the table at the kids. My daughter was trying to stab a piece of cake with a fork twice her size. My son was whispering something to his cousin and giggling. They were blissfully unaware that their mother had just been demoted from strategist to meme with a pulse in front of half the town. Something inside me went very, very still. Not broken, exactly. Not yet. More like frozen. Like a lake in winter. The surface glossy and calm. The things underneath slowed to a stop. I tuned out the rest of the conversation. The noise around me turned into a kind of muffled hum, like I was underwater. People talked about local politics, about a new development on the edge of town, about the price of lumber, about sports. I nodded when it seemed appropriate. I laughed when others laughed. My body went through the motions on autopilot while my mind replayed the same lines. She just plays on Pinterest all day. PhD and Target runs. Not a real job. In the car on the way home, the kids fell asleep within minutes, their heads tilting toward each other in the back seat. Streetlights flashed across Ethan's face in intervals as he drove, his jaw tight with the kind of tired that doesn't go away with one good night of sleep. He glanced over at me at a red light. "You're quiet," he said. "Everything okay?" I looked at him, at the man who had called my unpaid, uncredited labor a joke to make a room full of people laugh, and I opened my mouth. But before I could speak, the light turned green and he said, "Remind me tomorrow to call the supplier about that back order, okay?" And launched into a monologue about inventory and payroll, about numbers and deadlines, and all the ways he was, undeniably, working like a dog. I closed my mouth. On the drive home, Ethan asked why I was quiet, then changed the subject before I could answer. The thing about humiliation is that it never shows up on your calendar. It doesn't give you time to dress for it or rehearse your reaction. It just hits. usually under fluorescent lights. I was standing in the checkout line at the grocery store with a cart full of very ordinary things: milk, bread, cereal, apples, chicken breasts, a frozen pizza for the night when I knew I'd be too tired to pretend I wanted to cook. Nothing extravagant. No champagne or lobster or designer anything. Just Tuesday. The line was long enough that I'd scrolled through all my notifications twice. PTA email, sale at Old Navy, LinkedIn message from a recruiter I wasn't going to answer. I tucked my phone away as my turn came up and started unloading the cart, item by item onto the conveyor belt. "Find everything okay?" the cashier asked. She was maybe 19, with chipped black nail polish and a name tag that said Maddie. "Yeah, thanks," I said, lining up the yogurt cups like soldiers. "Just the usual." She scanned, bagged, made small talk about the weather. The total popped up on the little screen. A perfectly normal amount of money to spend on feeding a family of 4 for a week. Nothing that should have been dramatic. I inserted my card, the same one I used every week, the one linked to the joint account our mortgage and bills came out of. The machine beeped. Declined. I blinked, pulled the card out, wiped it on my jeans like that ever does anything, and tried again. Declined. Maddie gave me a quick, nervous smile. "Sometimes it's the chip," she said. "Do you want to try swiping?" "Yeah," I said, my voice suddenly too loud in my own ears. "Yeah, let's try that." I could feel the people behind me shifting, the weight of their attention pressing between my shoulder blades. I swiped the card. Declined. The machine hadn't gotten the memo about being gentle. The word might as well have been shouted through a megaphone. My face went hot. "That's weird," I said, forcing out a laugh that sounded like it belonged to someone else. "There should be money in there. Can you try one more time?" "Of course," she said, soft and kind in a way that somehow made it worse. Behind me, someone sighed. A cart bumped into another cart. I imagined the thoughts forming around me. Overspent, careless. One of those people who buys more than they can afford and then acts surprised. Wanted to hold up a sign. "I used to approve budgets bigger than this store's entire weekly revenue. I know how numbers work." But right then, I was just a woman with a cart full of milk and bread, feeling the weight of the word declined, and begging a 19-year-old cashier for a third try. It was the cheapest, most public way I could have been reminded that money talks, and my name was no longer on the conversation. "We can put it to the side if you need to call someone," Maddie offered quietly. "Or I can try another card if you have one." I did have another card, a credit card in my name. The limit wasn't huge, but we used it for emergencies and points. Groceries were not supposed to be an emergency. My hands shook as I pulled it out. This time, the machine beeped its approval. Approved. Bags kept moving. The line started breathing again. I signed the receipt with a hand that didn't feel like mine and mumbled a thank you. Maddie gave me that mix of sympathy and forced cheer cashiers are trained to use when someone has just been publicly reminded that money is in fact a real thing. Out in the parking lot, the bright sunlight felt harsh after the cool of the store. I loaded the bags into the trunk, each one heavier than it should have been. My heart was thudding in that slow, sick way that happens right after a scare, when your body realizes it's not dying but isn't ready to relax yet. As soon as I slid into the driver's seat, I pulled out my phone and called Ethan. He answered on the second ring, breathless. "Hey, what's up? I'm with a vendor. Can this—" "Our card got declined," I blurted. There was a tiny pause. What? At the grocery store, I said. The joint card. I had to use the credit card. Another pause. Longer this time. Huh, he said finally. Yeah, that's probably just cash flow stuff. Cash flow stuff? I repeated. For groceries? He sighed. I could picture him rubbing his forehead, that same gesture he used whenever the store's numbers didn't add up. We had a couple big invoices hit at once, he said. I moved some money around so the business account wouldn't get hammered with fees. It's fine. I'll shift it back. So there wasn't enough in checking to cover a basic grocery run? I asked. You're overreacting, he said. It's timing. Money's tight right now, you know that. And honestly, you've been a little loose with spending lately. Loose. The word landed like a slap. I buy food and clothes for the kids, I said. And I got a haircut last month. That's my wild lifestyle. He exhaled sharply. I'm not trying to fight. I'm just saying we've got to be careful. Until the store is fully back on its feet, there's not a lot of wiggle room. We can't swipe like we used to in the city. We never swiped like we used to, I said. We had 2 salaries in the city. We budgeted. This is different. I'm at the checkout with basic groceries and my card is getting declined. That's not timing. That's something else. It's business, he said, voice hardening. I'm dealing with it. I see the full picture. You don't need to worry about every little thing. I do when my card doesn't work, I shot back. A doorbell chimed faintly on his end. Look, I have to go, he said. We'll talk about it tonight, okay? Just don't stress. It was probably the bank being weird. The call ended with that hollow little click that always feels more final than it should. I sat there in the parking lot, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, feeling like I was strapped into a ride I hadn't agreed to get on. People pushed carts past my car, kids arguing about snacks, a couple laughing as they loaded a case of beer into their trunk. Nobody looking at me, but it still felt like the overhead speaker from inside, declined, was echoing out here too. When I got home, I put the groceries away mechanically. Milk in the fridge, cans in the pantry, bread in the drawer. The kids burst into the kitchen, immediately asking for snacks, turning the moment into something mundane. The sharp shame of the checkout line dulled, but it didn't disappear. Later, when they were occupied and Ethan was still at the store, I opened my laptop. If this was cash flow stuff, I wanted to see it. Our joint checking account had always been the hub. Paychecks used to land there, bills auto-paid, the rest allotted to savings, investments, the credit card. But now there was only one paycheck feeding it, and the numbers told a story I did not recognize as mine. The balance was lower than I expected. Lower than it should have been, even with a couple big bills. I clicked through the recent transfers. A pattern emerged. Money moving from checking into a separate account that didn't have my name on it. An account I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. I clicked again, denied access. You do not have permission to view this account. The phrase might as well have been stamped across my forehead. I called Ethan again. No answer. I tried once more an hour later. This time, he picked up, sounding tired. Hey, he said. What's up? Everything okay with the kids? They're fine, I said. I checked our account. He groaned softly. Babe. And I saw transfers, I continued, to an account I can't see. What is that? It's just a business buffer, he said quickly. I set it up to keep things separate. It's not a big deal. Separate from what? I asked. From me? That's not fair, he snapped. This is why I didn't want you to stress about the finances. You go straight to worst-case scenario. I go straight to worrying when my card gets declined and there's an account I don't have access to, I replied. Why don't I have permission to see it? Because it's tied up with business lines of credit and stuff you don't need to be involved with, he said. If something looks bad on paper, it can affect applications. It's just cleaner if I handle it. Cleaner for who? I asked quietly. He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was edged with defensiveness. You're not bringing in income right now, he said. I'm not saying that to be mean, it's just reality. I'm killing myself to keep everyone afloat. The least you could do is trust that I'm not out here trying to screw you over. I flinched. I didn't say you were trying to screw me over, I said. I said I don't know what's happening. There's a difference. Same thing, he muttered. You think if you had your little corporate job, we wouldn't still be in a tight spot? You think you'd be magically safe? My little corporate job, I repeated, the words tasting like metal. We would have 2 incomes. That's not magic. That's math. He made a frustrated noise. I can't do this right now. I'm exhausted. We'll talk later. We didn't. Not really. He came home, kissed the kids, collapsed on the couch. We watched a show with people arguing more loudly than we were allowed to. When the credits rolled, he said, "Long day tomorrow," and went to bed. I lay next to him in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the space between us like a physical thing. I ran through a mental checklist of what I actually had in my name right then. No salary, no personal savings. Those had been rolled into ours when we got married and slowly redirected toward family goals. My old 401k, dormant, somewhere in paperwork I hadn't seen in years. No car fully in my name. The house deed had both of us on it, but the mortgage payments were coming from his income now. If I walked out, what could I actually access without asking permission? My credit card, with its modest limit, the few $100s sitting in a checking account I'd never closed because it felt wasteful, back when I was employed and didn't think twice about banking redundancy. It wouldn't last long, not in this economy, not with kids. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how thoroughly I had stepped off my own path and onto his. All the things I used to tell women in online articles, keep your own account, know your numbers, never give up your earning power completely, floated back to me like lines from a self-help book I'd skimmed and ignored. Because I had been different. I had been smart, educated, career-minded. I wasn't the kind of woman this happened to. And yet here I was, lying in the dark next to a man I technically trusted, realizing that trust was the only thing between me and a financial freefall I had no parachute for. That night, I lay awake with a new question in my head. If I walked out right now, where would I even go? The laptop glow at night is a very specific kind of light. It doesn't have the cozy warmth of a lamp or the soft flicker of a TV. It's harsher, more clinical, like a spotlight you've turned on yourself. I'd carved out a home office corner at the end of our dining table. Really, just a chair that stayed pulled out and a stack of notebooks I kept promising to organize. The kids were finally asleep. Ethan had fallen onto the couch and then into bed, muttering something about inventory counts in his sleep. The house was quiet, except for the fridge humming behind me and the occasional creak of settling wood. I told myself I was just going to check email. Maybe scroll a little. Nothing dramatic. Instead, I opened a folder labeled Career Stuff, which was my first lie of the evening, because there was nothing current in there, just relics. Old cover letters, performance reviews I'd once read like love letters, screenshots of nice messages from bosses that said things like, "Couldn't have done this without you." And then there it was. Resume updated v7.docx. I clicked it open. My name at the top, my old city address, a phone number I still had, an email I still used, and then a neat little summary I'd written back when I thought I knew who I was. Results-driven marketing leader with X years experience driving brand growth through strategic campaigns, cross-functional collaboration, and data-informed decision-making. I read that line and felt like I was looking at someone else's dating profile. Below that, the experience section marched down the page in confident bullets. Marketing Director, Old Company, 20XX to 20XX. Leading a team of X, managing budgets of Y. Launched Z campaign that increased something by some impressive percentage. It was all true. It also felt like I had broken into a stranger's files and was pretending their life belonged to me. I scrolled to the bottom. The last date on the page was the year I walked out of that office with 3 cardboard boxes and a farewell banner that said, "We'll miss you," in a font better suited for a 6-year-old's birthday party. Everything after that? Nothing. If you counted, there were 8 years missing. 10, depending on how you started the clock. Pregnancies, maternity leaves. The slow fade from, "I'll just take a short break," to, "I guess this is my life now." On paper, those years looked like a hole. A sinkhole, really, where my professional timeline just disappeared. I tried to mentally cram everything I'd done in that time into bullet points. Collapsing kept 2 small humans alive. Ran a household on increasingly tight margins. Prevented my in-laws' business from falling completely off the digital map. Negotiated with insurance companies, school boards, and contractors. None of it sounded like something LinkedIn would applaud. There was no metric for number of emotional breakdowns averted, or percentage of crises handled before anyone else noticed. I clicked over to LinkedIn like I was checking an old neighborhood. The feed loaded with its endless stream of announcements. Thrilled to share that I've been promoted to VP of Brand at. Excited to announce I'm joining Startup as head of marketing. Smiling faces holding coffee cups, posing at conferences, on panels, in slick new office lobbies. People I'd once trained were now directors. People who used to ask me, "Does this make sense?" were now posting thought pieces about leadership. My own profile sat there like a memorial plaque. My headline still said, "Marketing Director at Old Company," even though that had stopped being true a long time ago. The dates on the job told the story more honestly than the headline did. Anyone looking closely could see the gap between where that role ended and nothing. No current position. No elegant line about a sabbatical or a transition. Just a blank space where my present should be. I clicked into the headline field. The cursor blinked at me, patient and accusing. "What are you now?" it seemed to ask. I could have typed something straightforward, I guess. Former marketing director, seeking new opportunities. Or, brand strategist on career pause, open to re-entry. But both felt like lies, told in different directions. One pretended I hadn't been gone for years. The other reduced nearly a decade of nonstop unpaid work to pause, like I'd been sitting on a bench scrolling my phone. I thought about trying to make the invisible labor sound impressive. Chief Operating Officer of a small, chaotic startup with 2 demanding stakeholders under age 10. Director of Household Logistics and Emotional Support. Freelance digital consultant for a family-owned retail brand. I almost laughed. I could already hear Ethan's sister rolling her eyes. It's not a real job. It's scrolling with extra steps. Her words, said over dessert, had lodged in a place I didn't know could bruise. I deleted everything I'd typed. The cursor went back to blinking over the word former, hanging there like a label I hadn't consented to but didn't know how to peel off. The more I stared at that empty field, the more the family's language crept into my head. She doesn't have to work. She just helps out a little. She's so lucky she can stay home. I started to wonder if the world would see it that way too. If a hiring manager would look at my gap and think, well, she must not have been that serious. Real career women don't vanish for 8 years. Never mind that I'd spent those 8 years doing more logistics, conflict resolution, crisis management, and multitasking than I'd ever done in an office. None of it came with a title, or a salary, or a bullet on my resume. The work was real. It just didn't count in the places that issued business cards. Self-doubt is sneaky. It doesn't march in with a banner and announce itself. It seeps in through hairline cracks, using other people's jokes as a vehicle. I heard my father-in-law's voice in my head. She just plays on Pinterest all day. I heard Ethan's. PhD in Target runs. I heard my own voice at barbecues and school events saying, "Oh, I'd just help Ethan at the store." Because it was easier than explaining who I used to be. Sitting there in the laptop glow, my shoulders curled in on themselves. I could feel myself getting smaller, even though I hadn't moved. Like someone had hit a slow-motion zoom-out on my life, and I was just a little figure at the bottom of the frame, blurry and indistinct. My fingers hovered over the keys. I tried again. Marketing professional re-entering the workforce after... After what? After choosing my family? After losing my footing? After being told repeatedly in 100 tiny ways that what I did all day didn't really count? I couldn't decide which version sounded worse. The truth was that I didn't know how to describe myself without apologizing. I didn't know how to own the years I'd spent doing invisible work without sounding defensive or desperate or like I was inflating my importance. So I did what a lot of women do when they're afraid of being called arrogant. I said nothing. I closed the headline field without saving. As if on cue, a little red dot appeared over the messaging icon. I clicked it, expecting another connection request from someone I barely remembered, or a mass message about some webinar. Instead, it was a recruiter. "Hi, my name. I came across your profile and was really impressed by your background in brand strategy. Are you currently open to new roles?" In another life, I would have read that and felt a spark. I would have thought, of course I'm open. Here's my portfolio. Here's my availability. Let's talk. Instead, my first reflex wasn't excitement. It wasn't even fear. It was shame. An urge to apologize, to explain why I wasn't really the person they thought they were reaching out to. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and the sentence that formed in my head wasn't, "Yes, tell me more." It was, "Sorry, I'm just a mom now." When a recruiter's message popped up, Are you open to new roles? My first reflex was to apologize. The coffee shop was technically a chain, but to me it felt like neutral territory. It was 15 minutes from our house, far enough that I couldn't see anyone I knew from my kitchen window, close enough that I could claim I was just running out for a bit and not raise suspicion. It had generic art on the walls, the same 5 pastries in the display case every day, and that burnt but comforting smell of espresso that clung to your clothes. The first time I went, I told Ethan I needed a change of scenery. "I'm going stir-crazy at the house," I said, grabbing my keys. "I might go sit at the coffee place for an hour, take my laptop, catch up on recipes or whatever." He was half-dressed for work, shirt untucked, rummaging through a stack of papers on the kitchen table. "Must be nice," he said distractedly, but his tone wasn't sharp. "Get a latte for me in spirit." His mom, Nancy, though I still thought of her as Ethan's mom in my head, glanced up from packing the kids' lunches. "Oh, that's good," she said. "You need a break. You're always running around. Take some me time." It sounded so wholesome when she said it. Me time. As if I were going to get a pedicure instead of quietly trying to resurrect the version of myself I'd buried. I bought the smallest coffee on the menu that still came with a lid, partly to justify my presence, and partly because spending $6 on caffeine felt like a crime now. I picked a corner table near an outlet, opened my laptop, and pulled up a recipe site for show in case anyone walked by close enough to see my screen. Then I opened a new tab and typed Best Online Marketing Courses 2020s. It felt like typing an affair into the search bar. I started small. A free refresher on Google Analytics. A webinar about changes in social algorithms. Blog posts from agencies dissecting campaigns I'd once devoured without thinking. My brain, which had been mostly filled with PTA dates and sales sections and inventory spreadsheets for the shop, sparked in a way I hadn't felt in years. I took notes. Actual notes. Bullet points and action items and questions to follow up on later. I watched a module about attribution models and realized how much the landscape had shifted while I'd been learning the fine art of getting grass stains out of tiny jeans. Occasionally, I'd tab over to Pinterest and pin a casserole recipe or a kids' room organization hack, a digital prop to support my cover story. Just in case anyone ever asked what I did with my coffee shop time, I wanted the lie to be at least partially true. Over the next few weeks, the coffee shop became my secret office. I went twice a week at first, then 3 times. Always during school hours. Always after doing enough visible chores that no one could accuse me of neglecting my real responsibilities. I'd throw a load of laundry in, wipe down the counters, send a couple of "just checking in" texts to Nancy about the kids, and then escape. The baristas started to recognize me. "Medium drip, splash of cream," one of them asked by week 3, already reaching for a cup. "Yeah," I said. "Thanks." He wrote my name on the side in big loopy letters. Seeing it there, on something that belonged just to me, felt strangely intimate. After my courses and articles warmed up the old muscles in my brain, I opened my LinkedIn again. The empty headline field still blinked at me, waiting. This time, I didn't try to pretend the gap wasn't there. I went down to my old job description and added a new bullet. Elemented digital strategy overhaul for family-owned retail business, resulting in X% increase in inbound leads and improved online visibility. I stared at the sentence. It felt like I was trying on a dress I wasn't sure fit, but it was true. The shop's online inquiries had gone up. The analytics proved it, even if no one at the dinner table took it seriously. I added another line about managing social channels and launching targeted local campaigns. I didn't mention that my team was just me, or that I was doing it between school pickups and grocery runs. On LinkedIn, effort and context mattered less than results. The guilt showed up as soon as I hit save. "Are you allowed to do this?" a little voice in my head asked. "You're not a real employee. You're just helping out a little." I shut the laptop halfway, heart racing, and pretended to look at my phone while I breathed through the spike of anxiety. No one was watching me. No one even knew what I was doing. But I still felt like I'd been caught sneaking around. Every time the door opened, the bell over it jingled. I flinched a little each time, glancing up, half expecting to see Ethan or Nancy walk in, eyebrows drawn together in that particular combination of concern and disapproval. "What are you doing here?" I imagined them asking. "Shouldn't you be with the kids? At the store? Why are you on that site? Who are you talking to?" They never appeared. It was just strangers in leggings and button-downs, college kids with headphones, retirees with newspapers. Nobody cared what I was doing. The only person policing me was me. On my 4th or 5th coffee shop shift, I opened my LinkedIn messages. The recruiter's note still sat unread, a little gray bubble reminding me that the world hadn't entirely forgotten I existed. Instead of answering him, I clicked on an old colleague's profile. Jamie. She'd been a mid-level manager when I left, sharp and funny, and better at office politics than I ever was. Her headline now said, VP of Brand and Customer Experience at New Company. I hovered over the message button for a full minute before clicking it. "Hey, Jamie. Long time no talk. Hope you're doing well," I typed. "Was just thinking about the old team and some of the campaigns we did. Looks like you've been doing amazing things. Congrats on the VP role." I deleted 3 drafts of the next sentence before settling on something bland. Life's taken me in a different direction for the last few years, but I've been dipping my toes back into the field and wanted to say hi. I read it 10 times, looking for traces of desperation. Then I hit send and immediately wanted to throw my laptop out the window. What was I expecting? That she'd drop everything and say, "We've been waiting for you, come back. Nothing has moved forward without you." More likely, she'd tap out a polite reply between meetings, and then go back to her VP's only Slack channel. Still, sending that message felt like dropping a pebble into a well to see if there was any water left. I sent one more to my old art director, a guy named Ravi, who had once told me, "You're the only strategist I know who can talk big picture and still catch a typo in the tagline." I reminded him of an inside joke about a client who wanted their logo bigger but more subtle. "Hope life's treating you well," I wrote. "I still think about that campaign sometimes." Then I sat there, nursing the last lukewarm inch of my coffee, refreshing the page like a teenager waiting for someone to like their post. By the time I packed up and walked out to the parking lot, no one had answered. Of course they hadn't. Adults had lives, meetings, children, problems that didn't involve existential crises in coffee shops. I sat in my car for a minute before starting the engine, letting the silence press in around me. It felt like I was living 2 different lives. One where I was the good wife and mom who ran her errands and showed up to the store when asked, and another where I was sneaking around trying to see if there was any part of my old self left to salvage. I went home, made dinner, helped with homework, responded to PTA emails. When Nancy asked how my little break was, I said, "Nice. I tried a new muffin recipe. That was true. I had pinned one between modules on email segmentation. That night, after everyone was in bed, I opened my laptop again at the dining table. Same corner, same chair, same glow. A red notification dot sat over my LinkedIn tab. My chest tightened. I clicked it. Jamie had written back. "Oh my God, hi," her message started. "I was literally talking about you the other day. I'm not surprised you stepped back, honestly. Corporate's a meat grinder. But if you're thinking about coming back, you should. You were always the brains behind those campaigns, you know that, right?" I read that sentence 3 times. You were always the brains behind those campaigns. Not, you were so helpful. Not, you were such a team player. The brains. The strategist. The one who saw the whole board. It was such a small thing, a throwaway compliment in a casual message. But coming after years of being just Ethan's wife, so lucky not to work, helping out a little. It hit like a defibrillator. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The kitchen was the same. The fridge still hummed. The pile of school papers still sat where I'd left them. Nothing in the room had changed, but something in me had. The day one of my old coworkers wrote back, "You were always the brains behind those campaigns, you know that, right?" Something in me shifted. The morning it really clicked for me didn't look dramatic from the outside. The kids were arguing about cereal at the kitchen table. One wanted the last of the chocolate kind, the other insisted they'd had it yesterday, so it was not fair. The dog was pacing for no reason I could see. The coffee maker was doing its best imitation of a diesel engine. It was loud and ordinary and exactly what my life was supposed to look like. A busy kitchen in a house we were lucky to have. I was wiping peanut butter off the counter when the front door flew open so hard it hit the wall. Hey, sorry, no time," Ethan said, already in motion, smelling like cold air and stress. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dumped a stack of papers onto the kitchen island. They fanned out across the granite. Invoices, statements, something that looked suspiciously like a half-finished marketing brief I hadn't agreed to write. "Can you handle these before the kids' soccer?" he asked, not really asking. "Dad's freaking out about the past due stuff, and I told him you'd get the invoices organized and finish that social plan we started." I looked at the pile, then at him. "You told him I'd handle all this? Today?" "Yeah," he said, already rifling through his bag for his keys again, like the conversation was just background noise. "You know this stuff way better than he does. It'll take you, what, a couple hours?" A couple of hours I'd apparently already promised in his mind. I glanced at the clock. 8:07 a.m. The kids had to be at school by 8:30. Soccer started at 4. Somewhere between those times, he'd gifted away my entire day without even pausing to include me in the decision. "What about the stuff I was supposed to do today?" I asked. He blinked, confused. "Like what?" I almost laughed. Like what? As if my to-do list was a hobby I could swap out for his as needed. I thought about the laundry, the grocery run, the dentist forms, the follow-up emails for the PTA fundraiser I'd somehow ended up in charge of, and the online course module I'd bookmarked last night under the heading Next Step. "Never mind," I said. "What's this?" I flicked the edge of the marketing plan draft. "That's the promo for the spring sale," he said. "Dad wants to push some inventory before the new stuff comes in. We talked about maybe doing a mailer and some posts. I told him you'd flesh it out. Of course he did. He checked his watch. Oh, also, the accountant's calling at 10. I told him you'd sit in. He's got some questions about the numbers, and you know them better than I do right now, honestly. Just, walk him through the online stuff, show him whatever he needs. I probably won't be able to get away. He said it all in one breath, like he was reading a grocery list. No malice, no awareness. Just an assumption baked so deep he couldn't see it. That my time was community property, free to allocate as needed. The old version of me would have either swallowed the resentment and said yes, or blown up and then felt guilty all day. The version who'd sat in a coffee shop reading about power dynamics and financial abuse, who'd watched her card get declined and found an account she couldn't access, did neither. Okay, I said slowly, buying myself a second. I'll see what I can do. He came over, kissed my cheek, grabbed a slice of toast that wasn't his, and yelled a goodbye toward the general direction of our kids. You're the best, he said. And then he was gone, leaving the door swinging shut and the stack of papers sitting in the middle of my morning. I stared at it for a long moment. The invoices, the scribbled notes in his dad's handwriting, the half-formed bullet points about promo discount, ask my name what she thinks. For years I'd told myself I was just helping out, that this was temporary, that I was the supportive wife, the flexible one, the one who could have picked up the slack because my schedule wasn't real, not like his. Standing there in that kitchen, coffee going cold on the counter, I saw it differently for the first time. I wasn't just helping. I was the backbone. The unpaid operations manager, marketing department, customer service fixer, and part-time bookkeeper. The only person in the house who understood both the school portal and the shop's analytics dashboard. And everyone was very comfortable pretending that made me disposable instead of indispensable. The kids' cereal argument escalated, mercifully snapping me out of my head. I settled it with Solomonic fairness, split the chocolate cereal, add regular to both. Nobody dies. I got them to school, smiled at the other parents in the drop-off line, made small talk about the weather. None of them knew I had an appointment to quietly redraw the lines of my own life at 10 o'clock. Back home, I made another cup of coffee, this one strong enough to double as a chemical peel, and spread the invoices out neatly. Old habit. When I'm angry, I organize. It's a way to trick myself into thinking I'm in control. Past due notices, vendor bills, statements from the bank. I sorted them into stacks while my laptop booted up. At 9:58, I clicked the link Ethan had forwarded from the accountant. "Morning," a chipper voice said as soon as the screen came to life. The accountant was a guy maybe 5 years older than us, with a too-neat haircut and the hunched posture of someone who lived in spreadsheets. "Is Ethan joining?" "Probably not," I said. "He's tied up at the store. But I handle most of the day-to-day now, so you're not missing much." He laughed, polite. "Got it. Well, thanks for jumping on. I had a couple questions about the way the online sales and in-store are being tracked. Some of the transfers between accounts are a little creative." My jaw tightened. "Creative how?" He clicked away, muttering number strings. "Nothing illegal, don't worry," he said. "But there's a lot of money moving between the main checking and that secondary account. Just want to make sure we're categorizing things right for tax purposes. It would help if I could see the full picture of all the accounts tied to the business and household." I felt something click into place in my mind. This was the same man who'd prepared our returns for the past couple years. He'd seen more of our financial reality than I had, and not because he'd fought for access, because Ethan had simply looped him in and left me out. I smiled. It felt almost pleasant, like stepping into a familiar role, except this time, I knew exactly what I was doing. "Yeah," I said calmly. "About that. Can you do me a favor? Going forward, I'd like to be copied on all reports and statements you send. Business and household. Bank accounts, tax filings, whatever you're already sending Ethan. Just add my email." There was a tiny pause as he recalibrated. "Sure," he said. "That's easy. What's the address?" I gave it to him. My heart rate didn't even spike. It felt factual, boring almost, the way good strategy often does. "And while we're at it," I added, keeping my tone light, "can you send me the last year's worth of statements you've already done for the store and for us? Just so I can get up to speed on how you've been categorizing things." He nodded, already typing. "Of course. Frankly, I'm glad someone else is taking an interest. No offense, but small family businesses are notorious for keeping stuff in people's heads instead of on paper." I laughed. "Oh, I know. That's why I'm here." We talked for another half hour. I asked questions I wouldn't have thought to ask a year ago. Not accusations, just clarifications. What counted as business debt versus personal? How our names appeared on the loans? Who was listed as the guarantor on what? He answered, happy to have an engaged adult on the line. By the time I hung up, my inbox was filling with PDFs. Tax returns, profit and loss statements, balance sheets that told a story in columns and rows instead of anecdotes at the dinner table. I moved the invoices into a to-pay stack and put the half-finished marketing plan in my bag. I'd work on it later, on my terms, not as a favor granted in the margins of my day. For the first time, it occurred to me that if I ever needed to prove how much value I'd contributed to this business, I'd have receipts. Literally. The house was quiet again. The dog snored on the rug. Sunlight slanted across the island, making the edges of the paper glow. I walked over to the junk drawer. Every kitchen has one. The place where dead pens go to die and rubber bands multiply. Ours was a museum of neglected intentions. Takeout menus, expired coupons, a key to something we no longer owned. I dug past all of it, fingers searching for a specific texture. Heavy cardstock, smooth edges. I found it near the back, stuck to an old birthday invitation. The lawyer's card was simple. Black text, white background. Her name in clean font. Family law underneath. A phone number and email below. A friend of mine from the city had given it to me over wine once, right after her own divorce. Just in case, she'd said. Everyone should have one of these, like a fire extinguisher. At the time, I'd shoved it into my purse and then, eventually, this drawer. Not because I planned to use it, just because throwing it away had felt ungrateful to the universe, somehow. As if I were telling fate I'd never need an exit. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it in my hand. I wasn't calling her, not yet. I wasn't even sure I wanted to leave. Despite everything, I loved my husband. I loved my kids. I didn't want to blow up my life. I just didn't want to be the only person in the house who didn't have a parachute. I took my wallet out of my bag and slid the card into a slot behind my driver's license. Not front and center, but not buried either. Accessible. Real. Then I put the junk drawer back the way it was, closed it, and stood there for a second, listening to the quiet. Nothing outside had changed. Ethan still thought of my time as elastic. His parents still introduced me as the one who helps out. The kids still saw me as the person who could magically produce snacks and missing socks. But now, the accountant had my email. My inbox had the numbers. My wallet had a lawyer's card. And my brain, freshly reminded that I had once been paid very well to think several moves ahead, was done pretending this was all just happening to me. I realized I didn't need to scream to change my life. I just needed a paper trail and a plan. Getting ready to leave and actually leaving are two very different things. For a long time, I told myself I wasn't the kind of woman who needed evidence. That was for messy people, dramatic people, women in Reddit stories whose husbands did things you could print out and hold up in court. We weren't that bad, I thought. We were complicated, stressed, misaligned, not dangerous. But once you start seeing your life in terms of who has power and who doesn't, it's hard to unsee it. After the call with the accountant and the quiet little ceremony of moving the lawyer's card into my wallet, I began to look at everything differently. Every email, every text, every login screen stopped being just a tool for getting through the day and became potential documentation. I didn't announce this to anyone. There was no dramatic moment where I stood in the kitchen and declared, "From this day forward, I will build my case." It was smaller than that, quieter. It started at the home office nook with my laptop and a fresh folder. The folder was called Personal. Nothing suspicious about that. Everyone has a personal folder. Inside it, I created subfolders with boring names: work samples, household, financial. No one looking over my shoulder would have thought anything of it. That was important. This wasn't about hiding. It was about not advertising. Then, little by little, I started feeding it. First came the emails. I combed through old threads from the shop's shared account and my own inbox. Anytime someone praised the online campaigns, I saved it. "Whatever you're doing on social is working. Keep it up," from a vendor. "Saw a huge bump in web traffic after your last promo post. Great job," from the guy who managed their payment processor. A message from Ethan himself, late one night the previous year. "You're basically our entire marketing department, you know that? Couldn't do this without you." I screen capped that one. It was such a small thing. A throwaway text sent from the couch while a game played in the background. But if anyone ever argued that I just helped out a little, it said something different. I dug up the spreadsheets. The ones with my initials in the corner, where I'd tracked leads from specific campaigns, matched them to sales, and used those numbers to convince his dad to keep investing in online. I saved copies to my cloud folder, making sure they showed the metadata, the dates created, the username logged in as me. On days when I was at the shop, I'd open the analytics dashboard, take screenshots, and email them to myself with subject lines like stats or idea later. It looked like I was just being thorough. In my own folder, they sat side by side, painting a picture of impact no one wanted to admit existed out loud. It felt clinical. Not vindictive exactly, but dispassionate. Like I was both the subject and the researcher, collecting data on a woman who'd given away her safety net and was slowly weaving another one. The coffee shop became my satellite office for this part, too. I'd sit in my corner with my too small coffee, earbuds in, screen full of tabs that looked ordinary from a distance. Pinterest, recipe blogs, a PTA spreadsheet. Zoom in, and you'd see what I was really doing. Downloading course completion certificates, updating my portfolio site with case studies, cleaning up the language on my LinkedIn to reflect not just who I used to be, but what I'd actually done in the year since. I wrote a new entry under Experience for the shop. I didn't call it Helping Out a Little. Digital Marketing Consultant, Family Business Name, 20XX, Present. I listed the responsibilities the way I would have for any job. Family-edited and overhauled web presence, resulting in X% increase in online inquiries. Diplashed and executed seasonal campaigns across email and social. Iman Analytics backing basic analytics tracking and reporting. I knew if anyone in the family saw it, they'd say I was exaggerating. That's fine, I thought. We can let the numbers decide. The next step was money. Opening a bank account should not be an act of rebellion. But when you've been absorbing for years the idea that our finances are handled by someone else, doing it without a big conversation feels like you're forging documents in a back room. I'd read enough personal finance blogs to know I needed something fully in my name, separate. Not to hide money, exactly, but to have something that wasn't dependent on anyone else's decisions. One afternoon, after paying the electric bill and moving money between accounts for the store, I opened a new tab and went to a bank's website. Not the one we use jointly, another one. I clicked Open an Account, filled in my information, answered the questions. What's the purpose of this account? The form asked. Rainy day, I typed. The confirmation email arrived within minutes. Just like that, I had a place that belonged only to me. Empty, but mine. The harder part was feeding it. I didn't have a paycheck to divert or a regular freelance gig yet. But money, I realized, doesn't only come in paychecks. It comes in drips and drabs, in refunds and side hustles, and things you can turn into income if you're willing to endure a little discomfort. I started with a babysitting gig. A friend from the PTA needed someone to watch her kids on a Saturday so she could take her mom to a doctor's appointment. I feel bad asking, she said, but I can pay. Old me would have said, don't be silly, you don't have to pay me. New me smiled and said, sure, that works, and set the payment aside instead of folding it into the general household pot. After she left that evening, I logged into my new account and deposited the cash at the ATM like it was contraband. Then there was the refund check, a reimbursement from an overpayment on a medical bill from months ago. It arrived addressed to both of us, but the amount was small enough that it didn't seem worth a conversation. I took a picture with the bank app and watched the pending balance change. Another drip in the bucket. The real turning point came when one of my old colleagues, Ravi, the art director, messaged me back. Hey, good to hear from you, he wrote. I actually might have a small freelance thing if you're interested. A friend's startup needs help with positioning and a basic launch plan. Nothing huge, but paid. You in? I stared at the message, heart hammering. Yes, I typed, then deleted it. Then typed it again. Yes, I'm interested. Tell me more about the scope and timeline. We went back and forth. It was real work. Strategy, messaging, a basic campaign outline. The fee wasn't life-changing, but it was non-trivial. Enough that in my previous life I would have considered it good side money. In this one, it felt like oxygen. I did the work from my coffee shop office and my dining table after the kids were in bed. I sent drafts, revised based on feedback, delivered a final deck that I was genuinely proud of. When the payment hit, a direct deposit into the checking account I'd linked for the job, I moved almost all of it into my new bank account. Watching the numbers tick up, even by a few $100s, did something to me. It didn't erase the fear. I still lay awake some nights thinking about worst-case scenarios, about custody and housing and lawyers' fees. But it gave me something to hold on to, besides hope and good intentions. My self-talk shifted in tiny increments. I still had moments where I thought, I'm trapped. Those feelings were real. But another voice, quieter at first, started to push back. You're not out yet, it said, but you're not as stuck as you were last month. Every screenshot saved, every email forwarded to myself, every login I made sure I could access became a brick in the path out of the maze. I wasn't running yet. I wasn't even walking. I was just facing the exit instead of the center. On good days, the plan in my head sounded empowering. Build my portfolio, grow my little account, keep learning, keep documenting. On bad days, it sounded like paranoia, like I was betraying my family by preparing for a version of the future where we weren't together. But then I'd remember the checkout line, the jokes at the restaurant, the way my card said declined in front of a teenager making minimum wage. And any guilt I felt about collecting evidence evaporated. If nothing else, I told myself, this is insurance. If we never use it, great. If we do, you'll be glad you didn't talk yourself out of being prepared. One afternoon, sitting in my car outside the coffee shop, I opened my bank app, the new one. The balance was laughably small by any reasonable standard. A couple $100, cobbled together from babysitting, a refund, and one freelance job. But it was there, under my name, under my control. I transferred $50 from my main checking into it. It was a symbolic move more than anything. I could have left the money where it was. But I wanted the motion, the deliberate act of paying myself first for once, even if the only person it impressed was the anxious woman in my own head. I watched the confirmation screen appear. Transfer successful. It was such a small line of text, such a small amount of money. But the first time I transferred $50 into that account, it felt like a secret door opening in a locked room. I didn't tell anyone I was going to the lawyer. On the family calendar on the fridge, the 10 a.m. slot was blank. In my phone, the appointment was labeled the way I used to label client meetings. Something vague enough that if someone glanced over my shoulder, they wouldn't think twice. Consultation, JW. Not, what happens if I leave my husband, or how screwed am I financially? Just initials. Neutral. Harmless. Her office was in a low-rise building near the highway, the kind of place I'd driven past 100 times without really seeing. The waiting room was smaller than I expected. 2 chairs, a fake plant, a coffee machine that had probably been there since 2009. A framed print on the wall said, "The only way out is through." Subtle. She was on time. That seemed important. "Hi, I'm Hannah," she said, offering her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes clear in that unsettling way people have when their job is to look directly at the things you'd rather keep hazy. "Come on back." Her office smelled like paper and highlighter ink. Legal pads stacked on a shelf, a diploma on the wall, a framed photo of 2 teenagers on a beach. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. "So," she said once we were sitting, "what brought you in today?" I pulled the lawyer's card from my wallet and set it on the desk between us like a confession. "A friend gave me your name," I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. "She said I should talk to someone before things got bad." Hannah smiled, not unkindly. "That was smart of her," she said. "And smart of you to come. Tell me what's going on, in your own words." I didn't have a rehearsed speech, but once I started talking, the words came out in an orderly line, like they'd been waiting for this. The career I'd had, the move, the temporary break that stretched into years, the jokes at dinner, the card declined at the checkout, the hidden account, the unpaid work at the store, the evidence I'd started collecting, almost against my own instincts. Every so often, Hannah would jot something down, names, dates, phrases. He moved money into an account I can't see. They say I help out a little, even though I run all the marketing. I don't know what I'd land on my feet with if I left. And you have documentation? She asked when I paused. Yes, I said, reaching into my bag. My hand didn't shake this time. Some of it. I laid it out on the desk. Printed emails praising my work. Screenshots of analytics dashboards with my login in the corner. The text from Ethan calling me their marketing department. Selected bank statements. The ones the accountant had started sending, showing the transfers I'd never been told about. Hannah took her time. She flipped through the pages, humming under her breath occasionally. When she got to the text from Ethan, she smiled faintly. "This is good," she said. I blinked. Good? In a legal sense, she clarified. This all helps. It tells a story. Judges like stories that have exhibits attached. I felt a strange rush of pride, almost, like I'd just handed in a solid strategy deck and gotten a nod of approval. Here's the thing, she continued, leaning back. You've been functioning as unpaid labor for a family business and as the primary caregiver at home. That has value. Not just moral value, legal value. In this state, we look at equitable distribution. That means we don't just split things 50-50. We look at contributions, financial and non-financial. So, what I've been doing counts? I asked, carefully. She looked at me like I'd asked if gravity applied indoors. Of course it counts, she said. Someone else doing what you're doing would be on payroll. You've been subsidizing the business with your time and skills. Courts understand that. We can make that case. You're not some freeloader living off your husband's generosity. You're part of what's keeping this whole structure upright. I swallowed hard. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that sentence until she said it. We talked about outcomes, not in a dramatic TV movie way, but in the language of calendars and statutes. She sketched out a few paths on a legal pad. Option 1, she said. You separate informally. One of you moves out, you two make your own arrangements about money and the kids. I don't recommend that if there's any financial imbalance, which there is. Option 2, you file for legal separation. That comes with formal orders, temporary support, custody schedules, who pays which bills. It creates structure. Option 3, you file for divorce. Same structure, but with an endgame. Each option had sub-bullets, custody considerations, business valuation, spousal support. She asked questions about the store, who owned what percentage, whose name was on which documents, whether we had any formal agreements. We don't, I said, shame creeping in. It's always been the family business. I just stepped in. She nodded. That's very common. It also means we can argue that your sweat equity helped increase its value. If we go that route, we'd probably bring in a forensic accountant to value the business. It's not just about what's in the bank today. It's about what you helped build. That sounds huge, I said. It is, she agreed, and it's scary. I'm not going to pretend it's not. but scary and impossible are not the same thing. She asked about the kids, their ages, their routines, what they were attached to. When I talked about their rooms, their school, how my daughter's best friend lived 2 houses down, my throat tightened. I don't want to rip them out of their lives, I said. Most moms don't, she replied. That's why these decisions are hard. But you don't have to have all the answers today. What you need right now is information and options, which you're getting. We went over fees, timelines, what I should and shouldn't do in the short term. No big financial moves without talking to her first. No confrontations about, I met with a lawyer, until I was ready for that grenade to go off. So what do I do now? I asked. You keep documenting, she said. You keep building your financial independence. Sounds like you've already started that. And you think. Not in circles, she added, but in plans. Best case, worst case, what you can live with. I'll be here when you're ready to take a step in any direction. She slid my papers back toward me, neat and squared. And you remember, she said, that you are not crazy or ungrateful for wanting a say in your own life. You're allowed to draw a line. When I stepped back out into the parking lot, the sunlight felt too bright. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands still on the steering wheel, and just breathed. Information and options. That's what I had now. It was terrifying, but it was also clarifying. The way hitting zoom out on a map is clarifying. The roads didn't get less scary just because I could see them, but at least I knew they were there. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. For a second, I thought it might be Ethan, my body bracing for some sixth sense drama. Where are you? What are you doing? But it was an email notification. Subject line, offer, remote contract role. My heart stuttered. I opened it. It was from the startup Ravi had introduced me to, the one I'd done the small project for. We've really loved working with you, it read. We're looking for an ongoing part-time contract, 10 to 15 hours a week, to help with brand strategy and campaigns over the next 6 months. Fully remote, flexible hours. Attached is a draft contract and proposed rate. Let us know if you're interested. The rate wasn't what I'd been making at my peak back in the city, but it wasn't nothing either. It was enough to put real numbers into the account with my name on it. Enough to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I wasn't just a ghost on LinkedIn with a nostalgic resume. I stared at the email, then at the folder on the passenger seat with Hannah's card paper-clipped to the front. Lawyer. Job. 2 different exits I hadn't had 6 months ago. I didn't reply right away. I forwarded the contract to my personal folder, flagged the email, and let the knowledge of it sit in my chest like a warm stone. When I got home, the day resumed its usual shape. School pickup, snacks, homework battles, Nancy asking if I could pop by the store tomorrow to help with something. I nodded, non-committal, my mind half a step removed, watching it all like a movie. That night, after teeth and pajamas and one more story, please, I stood in the doorway of my kids' shared room and watched them sleep. My son sprawled diagonally, superhero blanket kicked to the floor. My daughter curled around a stuffed animal that had lost half its stuffing years ago, but still qualified as essential infrastructure. Their faces were soft in the glow of the nightlight, unlined, unworried. They did not know what a business valuation was, or what equitable distribution meant. They just knew that Mom packed lunches and Dad smelled like sawdust, and the store on Main Street had their last name on the sign. I walked in and gently pulled the blanket back over my son's legs, smoothed my daughter's hair away from her face. My chest ached in that familiar, overwhelming way love has, of being both anchor and weight. For years, I'd told myself I was staying for them, that swallowing my resentment and playing along with the narrative, lucky, flexible, just helping out, was the price of giving them a stable home. That my unhappiness was an acceptable sacrifice on the altar of their childhood. Standing there, with a lawyer's card in my wallet and a contract offer in my inbox, I felt that story crack. What kind of stability was I modeling, exactly? A mom who couldn't buy groceries without fear? A woman whose work was the punchline at dinner? A backbone everyone leaned on for free until it threatened to break? My hand rested on the doorframe. I took a breath, then another. I don't know what this is going to look like, I whispered, more to myself than to them. But I'm not going to keep shrinking and call it love. Not for me, and not for you. I walked out of the kids' room, past the fridge that hummed like a judge. There it was, the schedule, the smiling avocado magnet, and the promotion email underneath, faded where the magnet had pressed hardest. I pulled the paper off. It left a faint, rectangular shadow on the stainless steel, but it didn't rip. I looked at the bold headline, Director of Brand Strategy. I didn't frame it, and I never will. I didn't need to. I took it with me, not as a reminder of the life I lost, but as a receipt for the life I had built myself back into. The woman who printed it had asked for permission. The woman who folded it and put it in her own private folder was giving notice. Family strategy meeting had always been code for the same thing. The men talked about vision and legacy, and I refilled coffee. When Nancy called to invite us over that Sunday, her voice had that bright, over-rehearsed cheer I'd come to recognize. "Your father wants to have everyone over to talk about the future of the business," she said. "You know, expansion, maybe new locations. We thought it would be good for the whole family to hear the plan. I'll make lasagna." She added, almost as an afterthought, "And maybe you can bring your laptop? You know how your father gets with numbers. It'll be good to have you there to take notes." I looked at my calendar. The square for Sunday had been empty. No lawyer, no contract calls, no coffee shop. Just family dinner, slid into place like it had the right to be there. "Sure," I said. "I'll bring what I need." I hung up and went to my home office nook. The binder was already half built. Tabs labeled campaigns, financials, communications. I'd started it after meeting with Hannah, organizing my evidence like a client file. It felt strange to add strategy meeting to the cover in neat black ink, but also fitting. I printed out what I needed. The timeline of campaigns I'd run for the store. Dates, platforms, results. Next to each, I stapled screenshots of analytics, spikes in traffic and leads highlighted in yellow. I slid in emails from vendors and partners, praising whatever you're doing online. The message from Ethan calling me their entire marketing department got its own plastic sleeve. On top, I placed a summary sheet, bullet points of my responsibilities at the store, written the way I would for a consulting proposal. It was the first time I'd seen my contributions laid out like that. Cold, clear, undeniable. In the car on the way over, Ethan tapped the steering wheel, humming along to the radio like it was any other Sunday. "Dad's really excited about this expansion idea," he said. "He's been talking about the next phase for weeks. Just don't let him drag you into anything too complicated, okay? I know he'll want you to pretty up his notes." "I'll listen," I said, "and I'll speak up if I need to." He glanced at the binder on my lap. "What's all that?" "Just some materials," I said. "Context." He shrugged, unconcerned. "You're the organized one. God knows we need that." Nancy had gone all out. The dining room table was transformed into a makeshift boardroom. Legal pads at each place, pens neatly aligned, a pitcher of water sweating onto a coaster. The lasagna waited on the sideboard like a reward for good behavior. Ethan's dad sat at the head of the table, paper spread in front of him. His sister scrolled on her phone, half listening. A printed agenda lay at each setting. "Here she is," his dad boomed when I walked in. "Our secret weapon. Grab a coffee, hun. We're just getting started." I poured my own coffee and took a seat, setting the binder in front of me instead of to the side. That was a small rebellion no one noticed, at least, not yet. "Okay," his dad began, tapping the table with a pen. "So, business is stable. Not great, but solid. We've survived worse. I've been thinking it's time to expand. Maybe a second location closer to the highway, maybe an e-commerce push. I won't be able to run all that myself forever, so this is about keeping things in the family, passing it down the line." He smiled at Ethan. "You, son." There it was, the line they loved. The business as inheritance, destiny, crown. I watched Ethan's shoulders straighten under the weight of it. "We'd all have to tighten our belts a bit at first," his dad continued. "Maybe pull some equity from the house. Maybe take on another line of credit. But with everyone pitching in, I don't see why we can't make it work." "Everyone," I repeated softly. His mom nodded toward me. "Well, she's already doing so much. We couldn't ask for a better helper. She knows the online stuff, she keeps the kids, she holds everything together. Obviously, she'd still be a big part of it. A helper, a big part. Zero mention of ownership, compensation, or choice." Ethan glanced at me, then away. "Yeah," he said. "We'd figure out the details." I took a sip of coffee. It tasted like burnt beans and resolve. "I actually brought something," I said, voice calm. "Since we're talking about the future." 3 heads turned toward me, surprised. I usually only spoke when spoken to in these meetings. Today I opened the binder. "I thought it might help to have some data on what I've been doing for the business before we make any decisions about expanding," I said. "So we're all looking at the same reality." I slid a few pages into the center of the table. Ethan's dad frowned, then leaned in. Nancy squinted. Ethan's sister finally put her phone down. "These are timelines of the digital campaigns I've run over the past few years," I explained. "Website updates, seasonal promotions, email pushes. You'll see dates, traffic spikes, and corresponding sales increases." His dad's finger traced a line on the chart, following a jump in online orders. "This is when we did that fall sale," he said. "We got slammed that week. I remember being exhausted." "That's right," I said. "The campaign I designed for that sale is here." I tapped the page. Copy, targeting, schedule. And this, I flipped to a stapled email, is the message from your payment processor noting the increase in online transactions. You replied, Our daughter-in-law is a genius. She saved our October. I highlighted that for you. A flush crept up his neck. Well, that's just how people talk. I smiled, but there was nothing soft in it. It's how you talked, and it's accurate. My work increased your revenue. That's not me bragging, that's me looking at the numbers. I saw Ethan's eyes flick from the binder to my face. Something wary sparked there. Why are we going over all this? He asked. Because when you talk about keeping the business in the family and passing it down the line, I said evenly, you speak as if there's a clear line between who runs the business and who supports it. As if Ethan is the heir and I am the help. As if I've been extra. His dad bristled. You know we appreciate you. We always say we couldn't do it without you. Yes, I said. And now, so does your accountant. I flipped to another tab and slid out a page. This is a summary he sent me after our last call. You'll notice my email is on the distribution list now, for business and household accounts. Nancy blinked. He sends things to you directly? Yes, I said, because I asked him to. I handle a lot of the day-to-day, so it makes sense, and because my lawyer suggested I should always have full access to any financial information connected to my work and my marriage. The word lawyer landed like a dropped plate. Your lawyer, Nancy repeated. Family law attorney, I clarified. We've been talking through what my contributions to the business and the household add up to, legally. She's very clear. Years of unpaid executive-level work, documented with emails, analytics, and your own words, give me real standing in any conversation about ownership and division of assets. His dad's face went a mottled red. Division of assets? Are you threatening to take my shop? He demanded. I kept my voice steady. I'm not threatening anything. I'm informing you that the fantasy where I could leave with nothing because my name isn't on the sign is just that. A fantasy. The law doesn't see me as a volunteer here. It sees me as someone whose labor increased the value of a marital asset. Ethan swallowed. We've never said you'd leave with nothing, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Not in those exact words, I agreed, but the implication has been pretty clear whenever you talk about how lucky I am to have you, Ethan, and the store, and this house, as if I haven't been paying into all of it in my own currency. I flipped to the last tab. Also, for context, I'm not just attached to this business anymore. I pulled out a single sheet with a logo at the top and slid it across. The contract summary from the startup. I've accepted a remote strategy contract, I said. 10 to 15 hours a week ongoing, paid at market rate. My work for them is separate from anything I do here. It means my income is no longer hypothetical. It's real. Documented. Growing. Nancy's eyes widened. You took a job. When were you going to tell us? When it was relevant, I said. Like now. When you're making plans that assume I'm a permanently available, unpaid backbone. Silence spread across the table like a spill. I'm not saying I won't help anymore, I continued. But going forward, any work I do for the business needs to be treated as what it is. Professional-level labor. Not a hobby, not a favor. Not something you can assign to me between school pickup and dinner without my consent. His dad started to sputter. We don't. I held up a hand, palm down. a gesture I'd once used in boardrooms to signal I was still talking. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm here to be clear about my role, about my boundaries, about my options. I have legal counsel. I have access to all the financials. I have independent income. I'm not trapped. So any future strategy needs to account for the reality that I am a stakeholder, not just a support beam." Ethan's sister shifted in her seat. "This is a lot," she muttered. "It is," I agreed. "And I understand it's uncomfortable. It's always uncomfortable the first time the person you leaned on for free says, 'I exist. My work counts.' You don't get to pretend it doesn't because it was convenient for you." His dad leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what? You're going to sue us?" he scoffed. "Take half the store? Tear this family apart?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "I hope it doesn't come to that," I said. "I would much rather we treat each other fairly now than ask a judge to do it later. But whether I stay or go, I know what I'm entitled to. And I'm done participating in plans that rely on me not knowing." No one spoke. In the absence of raised voices, the room was loud with everything that had just shifted. The hierarchy, the script, the easy assumption that I would always be grateful to be invited to the table, even if all I ever got to do was pour the coffee. Finally, Nancy cleared her throat. "Maybe we should eat," she said weakly. "The lasagna will get cold." No one argued. Plates were filled, forks clinked. Conversations skimmed along the surface: weather, the kids' school projects, a new show on Netflix. The strategy meeting never really resumed. The expansion talk fizzled out under the weight of my binder sitting in the center of the table like an unexploded device. When Ethan and I got in the car afterward, he fumbled with the keys, staring straight ahead. "That was intense," he said. "It was honest," I replied. He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, then closed it again. His eyes scanned my face, searching for the woman who used to back him up automatically. The one who would have rolled her eyes at his dad's plan and then quietly fixed his notes later. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he muttered, low enough that the kids wouldn't hear. "I don't know who I am either," I almost replied, but held my tongue. The silence in the car wasn't resentful. It was empty. He was grieving the loss of his automatic backup plan. He started the car, but he didn't look at me. Not on the driveway, not at the stop sign, not at the light where we'd once laughed about how we're on the same team. I watched his profile, the tight line of his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel. I thought about all the times I'd cried alone in our bedroom because I didn't know how to make myself heard without breaking everything. Turns out, I didn't have to break anything. I just had to stop pretending I was easily replaceable. I didn't raise my voice once, and still, by the end, Ethan was the one who couldn't look me in the eye. The funny thing about starting over is that from the outside it just looks like moving. Boxes in a hallway. A U-Haul in a driveway that isn't yours anymore. Your life folded into cardboard and labeled with a Sharpie in handwriting that gets messier the later it gets. My new place is a townhouse on the edge of town. Smaller than the house with the big yard and the family name on the mailbox, but it has something that place never really had. Light. Big windows in the living room. A patch of sunlight that moves across the floor during the day like it's checking on me. The first morning after the kids slept over, I stood in the kitchen with my mug, looking at the modest line of magnets on the fridge. There's no chore chart yet, no school calendar layered over a faded promotion email. Just their drawings, a postcard from my old city, and a single sticky note with my Wi-Fi password. The rent comes out of my bank account on the 1st of the month. So do the utilities, the groceries, the streaming services and the kids' apps and the random Target orders when someone outgrows shoes overnight. Every automatic payment that used to feel like a weight dragging us down now feels like a receipt with my name at the top. It's not glamorous. The townhouse is a little too close to the highway, so you can hear trucks at night if you listen for them. The kitchen cabinets have seen better days. My home office is a corner of the living room with a desk shoved against the wall and a plant I'm trying not to kill. But it is mine. Not in a fairy tale, mortgage-burning way yet, but in the way that matters. No one can threaten to take it away from me to make a point. The settlement wasn't a jackpot. This isn't one of those stories where the judge slams a gavel and suddenly I'm walking away with half of everything and a check big enough to fund a villa somewhere warm. It was a lot of numbers, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of compromise. What I got was fair. Fair meant a share of the business based on what we could prove I contributed. Fair meant some of that share converted into a buyout so I didn't have to stay tied to my in-laws' drama for the rest of my life. Fair meant support for the kids that shows up when it's supposed to, because there are court orders now, not just promises. Fair meant I didn't have to choose between a lawyer's retainer and a month of rent. I'm not rich, but I'm not starting at zero either, and I didn't have to go crawling back, apologizing for making people uncomfortable by daring to want a say in my own life. The remote contract that started as extra is now one of 2 clients. After everything went officially separate, word got around quietly in the network. Suddenly my inbox had messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. Heard you're freelancing more seriously now. Got room for a project? We need someone to help with launch strategy. Thought of you. I still work from coffee shops sometimes, but most days I'm at my little living room desk, laptop open, Slack pings and Zoom calls filling the space where the hum of the old fridge used to be. I block my calendar around the custody schedule. On my days with the kids, meetings end by 3:30 so I can be at pickup. On the days they're with Ethan, I stack my hours and dive deep. Shared custody is its own kind of exhaustion. The house feels too full one week and too quiet the next. There are nights when I close their bedroom doors and the stillness hits so hard, I have to go for a walk just to remember what moving feels like. But there's also this. When they're here, I am not a ghost. We sit at my wobbly kitchen table and do homework under a light fixture I picked out myself. We cook simple meals and make a mess. On good weather days, we walk to the park down the street. I bring my phone, but not to answer anyone else's emergencies. It stays in my pocket while I push them on swings and cheer when they manage the monkey bars on their own. One afternoon, my daughter grabbed my hand as we walked home from the park. "Mom," she said, "I like this house." "Yeah?" I asked. "Why?" She thought for a second. "Because you smile more here." I swallowed around something thick in my throat. "Me too," I said. Ethan and his parents tell their own version of the story around town. I've heard pieces of it, passed along by people who should know better than to repeat gossip to the subject of the gossip. According to them, I changed after having the kids. I got ideas put in my head by some lawyer. I walked away from a good man and a family who gave her everything. There's a version where I'm ungrateful, one where I'm unstable, one where I'm just lost. None of their stories mention the binder, the emails, the years of free labor, the nights I lay awake doing math in my head and realizing I had nothing in my own name. The fact that, when push came to shove, I was the one who had to build my own parachute. Here's the difference now. They can say whatever they want in that private dining room or after church or in the aisles of the grocery store. They can paint themselves as the heroes and me as the cautionary tale. But at the end of the day, when my rent hits, it's my signature on the lease and my income covering it. When my card swipes at the checkout, it clears. When my kids need new shoes, we go buy them. No grand speeches, no begging, no asking permission. The power isn't in who gets to tell the loudest story. It's in who can survive the quiet when everyone else has gone home. I think about sacrifice a lot now. People love that word. They use it like a badge. She sacrificed her career for her family. It sounds noble, and sometimes it is. There are seasons where someone has to step back, recalibrate, hold things together while someone else runs ahead. That's real. What I wish someone had told me is that sacrifice is supposed to be temporary and mutual. It's not meant to be a permanent identity you wear until you disappear. It's not supposed to be something other people volunteer you for in speeches and jokes, while you're the one paying the interest on it. If another woman sat on this second-hand couch with me and told me she was thinking about giving everything up just for a few years because her partner's family needed her to bend, I wouldn't tell her no. I'm not that arrogant. But I would tell her this. Don't give up your ability to walk away. Keep your own account. Know where the money is. Ask to see the statements and don't accept "you don't need to worry about that" as an answer. Put your name on things that your labor is building. Treat your unpaid work like a job in your own head, even if no one else will. Track it. Quantify it. Be honest about how much it would cost to replace you. And most of all, don't let jokes become reality. The first time someone turns your work into a punchline in front of other people, pay attention. The second time, remember how it felt. The third time, ask yourself who benefits from you laughing along. If you're already where I was, standing between a freezer full of other people's groceries and a lawyer's business card in your wallet, here's what I'd say. You are not crazy for wanting more than to be lucky to exist in someone else's shadow. You are not selfish for wanting your kids to see you as a whole person, not just the background of their childhood. You are not dramatic for collecting evidence and opening a bank account and learning how much your work is worth. You are doing what any smart strategist does when a campaign isn't working. You're pivoting. My life is smaller now, in some ways. Fewer rooms. Fewer holidays with big extended family tables. Fewer people weighing in on my choices like they have a vote. But it's also brighter. There's more air. More space to stand up straight. I still have days where I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Deadlines, kid schedules, budgets. I still sometimes scroll LinkedIn and feel that old twist of envy at people whose timelines don't have gaps. I still hear old echoes in my head. Must be nice not to have to work. She just helps out a little. That's not a real job. Then I open my laptop, log into a campaign dashboard with my name on the account, and see results that exist because I built something. I pay a bill. I tuck my kids into bed in a home I chose. I answer an email from a client who only knows me as what I am to them, a professional. I used to think the bravest thing I'd ever done was give up my career for my family. Turns out, it was taking it back.